Mweti. Yes. So as Mweti has said, my name is Gail Bosch and I head up the Artinsure team, which includes art, collectibles and classic cars, as well as photography. So today we're going to be focusing on art and collectibles and the global luxury investments and for us to support local. But before I start on that, here we go. Before I start on that, I just wanted to make a quick mention of the Western Cape floods. I know there have been quite a few reports of damages in the Western Cape. There's a lot of rain happening there, not so much at the moment, but over the last couple of weeks, and there has been extensive damage. I did want to remind everybody that when you do have a collector's policy, we have a benefit on the policy that I'll just put on the screen that would basically cover the client for removing the artworks if they are in imminent danger. So say, for example, in Cape Town, it could be fire or flood. It does seem like Cape Town is the lucky area at the moment. But if your collection is in danger of getting damaged, then we would cover the cost of removing the collection from the imminent danger, putting it into professional storage, and then the costs of returning it once the danger is passed. So if you do have any clients that are in high-risk areas, just please do remind them of this cover. Okay, now let me move on. So in terms of the general art market environment, it is important for our clients to update values. You'll see later when I go through the slides, the increase in the global index and art pricing. But the reason I'm bringing this up is just to flag for your clients that if they do particularly have valuations or if they've done purchases overseas and the valuation is in another currency, is to ensure that the rand value that we're insuring it at is sufficient to cover at that rate of exchange. We do recommend that clients update their valuations every 2 years for contemporary works, potentially even every year, because those are the values that are changing the most frequently. Your antiques and old masters paintings will generally need an update every 2 years. And then let me show you the reports that I'm going to look at from Knight Frank Wealth Reports. Right, we've got some inflation busters here. And I'll go through these in detail, but this is just an overview of, in blue, it's the 12-month, the previous 12 months records. And in pink, you'll see the 10-year results. So this is the luxury index, and all of these items, okay, apart from the loose diamonds, are items that we can insure under the collector product. So here's a breakdown of the 12 months. You can see art has done very well in the last year. The global index has gone up by 29%. Cars very close behind at 25%, and whiskey at only 3%. But if you have a look at the 10-year period, whiskey's at 373%. Cars are still doing well at 185%, and art at 91%. So you can see this is an industry that's growing. People do collect artworks and other appreciating assets to diversify their portfolios, as well as because they are passionate about collecting. Then just to advise all of the different varieties of assets that we're able to insure. We can insure art. So Artinsure gives the impression that it might just be art on the walls and sculptures that we can include. But when we're talking about appreciating assets, it can be anything from books, clocks, carpets, wine collections, jewelry, maps, sporting memorabilia, whiskey collections, toy collections, model cars, model airplanes. The variety that we can insure under this product is incredible. As long as these assets are appreciating and we do have a valuation or a purchase invoice to support the agreed value. Okay, now I'm going to go through some of these record-setting auction. So here we've got Andy Warhol's Shot Sage Blue Marilyn, and that became the most expensive 20th century artwork ever sold at auction. The work fetched $195 million, and it's become the second most expensive work on the auction market, behind Leonardo da Vinci's Salvator Mundi, which sold for $450 million. Then we've got the most expensive car ever sold, and this is a Mercedes-Benz 300 SLR. And I've got a quick video to show you for that vehicle.
to open this evening's auction at 50 million euros. At 70 million euros. In a new place at 85 million euros. The Uhlenhaut Coupe, the Mercedes-Benz 300 SLR Coupe. This is it, your final chance. 80 million. 100 million euros. First man to bid 100 million euros for the car. Thanks, Michelle. Back in the room here, 110 million euros. It could be yours. The hammer is up. 135 million euros. Here it comes, and selling. It's yours. Sold to you, sir. Thank you very much indeed. Congratulations. Thank you very much.
Crazy, right? Some of the other record breakers is this watch that was sold by Sotheby's, and that is the most expensive Patek Philippe's watch that has been sold. So 143 million rand for a watch. The last record holder was the Esprit that was sold for $4 million at Sotheby's in Geneva. And here we've got the record-breaking handbag. So this handbag sold for the equivalent of 6.6 million. And the name comes, the snowy white to gray gradation is meant to invoke the Himalayan mountains, which is where the Himalayan names comes from. And also it's named after the movie star Grace Kelly. So this is definitely a record breaker for handbags at the moment. And it is something, again, that we can insure. For those of us who are wine aficionados, this was the record holder for wine collection, and it is a Methuselah, which means it's 6 liters, and such large formats are produced in minuscule quantities, so they're seldom available, and that's why it has fetched such a high price. Here we have an 1821 US $5 denomination, and it's called the Half Eagle, that was sold at Heritage Auctions for 85.6 million rand. Here's a nice one for anyone looking for an engagement present. The Williamson Pink Star, my apologies. And this ring sold for just over R1 billion at Sotheby's at auction. And pink diamonds are one of the rarest diamonds that you can find. Most pink diamonds fall into the ranges of faint pink to fancy pink, and this has been described as a fancy vivid pink. And those are the most rare diamonds, along with blue diamonds. In the antique furniture area, there was a Ming Dynasty folding horseshoe back armchair. And the reason that these are so sought after is because the nature of the folding design means that the chairs are more prone to damage, making one in excellent condition very, very sought after at 296 million rand. Now, we don't insure loose stones and diamonds, but I did think that this was interesting in terms of the values that were raised. And this is a De Beers blue diamond that was sold for also just over R1 billion. And here we have the record holder for the whiskey that was sold in 2022. And this whiskey went for a cool 5.5 million rand. And it's got this beautiful container and sculpture that comes along with it. This particular whiskey is number 3 out of 288. So only 288 of this Macallan was made. And this is bottle number 3.
Gail, the slides
the slides are not following. My apologies.
There we go.
Sorry, there's the diamond. And there he goes, the whiskey. Okay, so part of the survey that Knight Frank did with the wealth industry was to have a look and see what clients are anticipating purchasing within, the next financial year, and to see what the appetite is. So you can see here, if we're comparing Africa to the global average, There are 36% of people that plan to invest in art, compared to 59% of the global industry. And for classic cars, we seem to have a higher appetite than the rest of the global industry, with 50% looking to buy classic cars compared to 34% on the global average. But a very good indication that people are looking to spend more in the luxury index coming forward. Right, there's just a little graph to show exactly what the difference is between South Africa and the global market, South Africa being in the red and global average being in the blue. And here's an overview of the general art market environment, which is a $16.5 billion industry in terms of the global turnover. Now, last year when I presented, we had quite a boom in terms of NFTs, and there was a bit of a crypto crash, which has changed the market dramatically. So the survey has indicated that a third of all respondents believe that the NFT art market still has a lot of potential. 32% never had any confidence in NFTs. 20% were open-minded until the crypto crash, and 12% have no idea what an NFT is. Just a reminder for everyone that it is a non-fungible token, and these are artworks that are housed online. So we went from a staggering total of $232.7 million in 2021, but the auction turnover for 2022 is $13.9 million, which is a contraction of 94% in comparison. Here we've got an indication from ArtPrice that's showing the types of art that people are buying. So majority you can see is paintings at 70.9%, followed by drawings, sculpture, print, and then a very small portion of NFTs and photography.
Gail, we've got a couple of questions that relates to things that we frequently asked in relation to verification. So Kobana Solomon had asked, how is the authenticity verified? And Bernard Brewer asked, would you guys be able to assist with contact details for someone who can evaluate a private collection of whiskey? So those are questions that we get often. How do we verify, and where do we get this verification done?
So we do have a panel of experts that we rely on, and that panel includes valuers as well as people that can authenticate the validity of the artworks. So get in touch with us and we'll put you in touch with the expert that would be able to help with that. And then in terms of whiskey as well, yes, we do have a number of valuers that can assist with whiskey valuations. Right, then I'll show you the global fine art and NFT auction market by the price range, and this is quite interesting. We've got 90% of lots that sold for less than $12,500, 70% that sold for less than $2,200, and 50% of the lots sold for less than $762, which is the equivalent of about 15,000 Rand. So what is interesting for me for that is that it does indicate that we've got considerable interest in the emerging artist market. And we're very passionate at Artinsure about supporting emerging South African artists, living artists, and educating young, talented artists so that we can grow the art market and can make sure that the market does continue. So to that end, I'm going to be introducing Sara Hallatt to discuss the local talent support and to tell us about Open Studios, which is an exciting new art initiative. Sarah is currently the founder and director of the Meta Foundation and the managing director of August House. In 2011, she took up the directorship of one of SA's foremost visual arts, namely the Fordsburg Artist Studios. Sarah has a bachelor in dramatic arts and a postgrad diploma in business, and she sits on a number of boards within the visual arts and creative sector. So thank you very much for joining us, Sarah. I'm going to stop sharing my screen and I will hand over to you.
Thank you so much, Gail. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for your time. As Gail mentioned, I wear a number of hats, but one of the things that I am here to talk to you about today is a project that we initiated. I guess the first kind of big iteration of it was last year, but we have done a number of soft launches over the last 2-3 years, sorry. And that's called Open Studios Joburg. I see someone's got a question. Benita? Do you have a question for me? I see a hand raised. No? Anyway, so this project takes place in May. It is currently an annual event and it's called Open Studios Joburg. So what I'm going to play for you first is a little video that it's a piece of content we created from a marketing perspective, but I think it gives you like a very brief overview of how the event works.
Hi, I'm here to tell you about Open Studios Joburg. It takes place on Saturday the 27th and Sunday the 28th of May. With over 160 artists participating in the 4th iteration of this event, this festival allows you an opportunity to meet the artists, see their work, and hopefully buy something amazing for your home or office. Joburg is filled with creative inspiration. Come explore and feed your soul. This festival will give you access to 11 creative spaces, with different spaces open on different days. So, what do you need to know about the event? Firstly, the event is ticketed. Please visit our website or Quicket to be able to buy your tickets. Tickets are 50 Rand for adults and children under the age of 18 free. Each venue requires a ticket. So when you buy your day pass, you will see a list of options for all the venues you wish to visit on that day. Please bring along your printed or digital ticket with you. It will be scanned in order to give you access into the building. Tickets will also get more expensive on the day, so we suggest that you get them now. The event runs over 2 days, with different spaces open on different days. On Saturday, the 27th of May, Bag Factory Artist Studios, Lillian Road Studios, Bridge Books, the Rand Club, Play Braamfontein, and the Creative Uprising at Transafrica will all be open. On Sunday, the 28th of May, Asisebenza Art Atelier, August House, Ellis House, Living Artists Emporium, and Victoria Yard will all be open. There are many parking opportunities on street, off street, and underground. So please visit our website at www.OpenStudios.Joburg for more information. There is also a connecting shuttle which will link each of the venues to each other. This hop-on, hop-off service will mean that there is a shuttle arriving every 15 to 20 minutes. This year, we've actually created 2 loops, so you can go in one direction or the other direction, depending who you want to see and what you want to do. This will allow you to seamlessly move between the spaces. We look forward to hosting you at the largest on-the-ground visual arts festival in Johannesburg.
So for those people who aren't entirely aware, there are a number of spaces across the CBD, mostly of Johannesburg. There are spaces outside of the CBD, but there is a glut of them in the CBD that literally act as, for want of a better word, office spaces for artists. So these are places that artists come to every day to create their artwork. Obviously, the majority of them are professionally practicing full-time artists. This is their job. So what this event has done is grouped all of those spaces together in an opportunity to provide an opportunity for visitors to get to come into the studio space. What we find with audience members is that the act of creation is the fascinating part for them. Obviously, they love the artwork in its completed format, but how the artwork gets made is often a huge kind of inspiration and question and kind of discussion for the people who are interested in artworks. So, I mean, the event started with this idea of trying to kind of bring Johannesburg together and using culture to do that, and obviously focusing it in to the CBD. We had a number of aims and objectives, the first being one to connect. So what you find in South Africa is that we have substantially more artists within the emerging space. Emerging artists are typically artists who have been practicing for less than 5 years or 7 years, give or take. These artists, their work tends to be cheaper. It's a bit of a higher risk purchase because you're not sure what's going to happen in their career. But if we want them to survive for 20 years or 40 years, we need to be able to give them access to markets. These typically aren't artists who are picked up by galleries yet in this stage in their career, so their chance of survival can be quite small. We wanted to provide a way to drive audience development. So what we know about South Africa is that there are very few people who are so-called interested in the visual arts. And I say so-called interested because the data that is often used for this kind of thing are secondary market sales or the export of artworks. What we've actually seen through this event is that there are substantially more people who want to get involved but don't know how. They have the money, they want to buy the artwork, but they feel entirely intimidated by the gallery space or the art fair. And I know from my own buying journey that once you start, it is somewhat addictive. So if we can get them in the ground level now, if they can spend 10 grand now, it's a hop and a skip and a jump to 80,000 rand. It really isn't like far away. So we're trying to build this audience in the city. We're also trying to get people to come to these things more frequently. So these organizations exist. Some of them have existed for forever. The Bag Factory was founded in 1991. So, you know, some of them have been around for a long time. And we want people to come back to them with more level of frequency. So once you've kind of gotten over your nervousness about the CBD and you've come to one of these events and see the great work that's inside and been really inspired, the chances are that you're going to come back and do more of it, which also then translates hopefully into more sales over the course of the year. We want to amplify what people understand about Joburg's creativity and the art, right? We know that there are definitely people buying, as I mentioned, but what they're buying, there's a naivety to a young buyer. Every person who starts a collection will often not buy amazing work or will buy very cheap work. And they often love that piece. It's often their most favorite piece in their collection because it's the thing that kickstarts their buying journey. But this amplification of what is out there, what's available, getting more educated about the quality of the work. And then, of course, the last thing is that the creative sector in South Africa is not very well supported from a governmental point of view. We just don't have the kind of funding in this country. So we're trying to find ways to empower the whole creative sector and give them the power to be able to do that. So if we can develop their own audience space, if they can create more sales for themselves, these are all things that then remove their reliance from, you know, any other kinds of funding. So as I mentioned previously, this is our second big iteration of this event, which means that we were able to collect some data and we can therefore compare it. So in our very first year, we had 2,000 people attended the event. This year we had slightly more. We think that we would have had even more if we fell on the same weekend as another art fair, the R&B Latitudes Art Fair. We had a higher rate of visitor check-in. So I don't know if you remember in the video, I said that each place was ticketed and you needed a ticket for each place. So what we do is we actually look at where people are going to and the frequency at what they are looking at. So in this particular instance, what you can see is that more people checked into more places. And I think that this is a function of people trying to make the most out of their time, trying to see as much as humanly possible. But maybe also there's a slightly less, there's a reduced fear factor here. So once, you know, if you came last year and you've got the hang of it, maybe you're going to see more this year because you kind of know what you're doing. What we do from an audience perspective is when we sell the tickets, we generate a database, obviously, and we share that database with each of our partner organizations. So 1,300 people is a massive amount of people to be able to say, for example, that our partners can contact them. So pretty stable numbers from last year to this year. But what is great is that these were a different 1,300. So collectively, that's 2,600 people over 2 years that have been added to all of these organizations' databases. We also have had an increase in partner venues, and I think this is phenomenal, that we have gone up. And during our production, we got 2 more calls this year for more spaces that wanted to join. Unfortunately, it was too late. But I think that this just shows that people, the organizations and the artists see an interest in the event. The very first year, the very first year we had 107 artists or designers or makers participate. You can see that that number has gone up dramatically. And I suspect one could do more, although I know as an audience member, there's no way you're going to be able to see all of those people.
Yes.
And then our media coverage. This for me is the most kind of interesting. So one would think that the media is pretty jaded and uninterested, and why would you cover something like this? But the media coverage has gone up substantially. And I think that this is because of a number of reasons. One, like we're all in dire need of a good news story of interesting things that are happening in our city by great people. But also, I think there is this hunger from readers for this information. And I think this just talks to the fact that there is a market to be grown here. And if we can make the circle bigger for all of us will ultimately benefit. We have some pretty pictures. So as you can see in these pictures, the engagement is in the studio space with the artists. So the lady here on the left in the black sort of polo neck is talking to somebody else. She is the artist. This is her space. This is her artwork. She has an opportunity to interact directly with audience members and maybe explain stuff to them in a very unjargoned kind of a way. Same thing in the top right-hand corner. The lady in blue is the artist, and she is speaking to some visitors. While we had during the course of the weekend, we have the shuttle system that connects all the spaces to each other, so you don't have to worry about town and getting lost in one-ways and all of that jazz. And while people were sort of trapped on the buses, we asked our audience some questions and got some interesting visitor feedback. So you can see in 2022 and 2023, what you see here is quite an interesting jump in that we had a more even spread of numbers in 2023, but equally that about 50% of the people who attended this event are under the age of 30. This is our emerging artists, our emerging buyers group. If we can hook them now, by the time they clock over 30 and they start to earn a reasonable amount of money, they will be our new buying group. These will be, with quite a short time period, these are the kinds of people that you can convert into buyers. We asked people why they were attending the event. And in both cases, both years, over 50% of them said that they're curious about the visual arts. So these are people who are not buyers yet, but they may become buyers. This for me shows the kind of room for movement within the visual arts sector. The red block says that they buy and support artists. So we can see there's been a slight decrease here. I'm not entirely surprised by this because we obviously have seen great economic contraction over the past year. And also people who maybe had some liquid capital hanging around might have recently bought inverters or be investing in solar panels. Or unfortunately, 3 days before this event took place, the interest rates had gone up. So, I mean, I think there are some outside kind of economic factors driving this. But even so, if you could take the 50% who are interested and add them to the 17% who are already doing this, if you can even get a fraction of that 50%, you're going to radically shift what the market is able to do. We asked them who purchased artwork. So obviously the first big portion in blue is 0 to 2. So that could mean that they purchased nothing or that they purchased 2 works. We've got 13% in the 2022 category as 3 to 5. And interestingly, 15% in 2023. And when Gail and I were talking about this yesterday, it's likely to be an expansion within a particular price point. But it's an expansion and we're happy for that. What you can see, unfortunately, is the people who bought 6 or more, that has decreased. And I think for all the reasons I mentioned earlier. We obviously asked them where they buy their artwork from. And I think this is one of those kind of tricky questions, because obviously if they're attending Open Studios, the chances are that they buy their work from artists, but the quantity is quite surprising. So 60 or 62%. And then you can see from a gallery, only 27 or 24. And then, of course, auctions, the pie has shrunk dramatically. And in fact, in 2023, dealers and advisories has picked up. Pretty pictures of pretty artworks, because that's what we love.
Absolutely.
Our sponsorships and partners. This is a crazy kind of idea, this event. It's like a decentralized art fair that is somewhat complicated, but we would not be able to do this without the support of the people who kind of have a like-minded view on what it is that we're trying to achieve. And we've got, you know, obviously Artinsure has come on board, and this is the second year that they have supported us in this event, for which we're incredibly grateful. We also found ways to work with interesting media partners, not in the traditional sense. I think a lot of what we've done actually has been the opposite of the traditional. So Joburg in Your Pocket is more a tourism-focused company that has worked with us on generating marketing and media for the event. And African Arts Content is an NGO that is very concerned about critical art writing, because over the last sort of 10 years, the newspapers have, because newspapers are in trouble, have mostly gotten rid of their specialists in this field. So we're working with an NGO to ensure that there are writers who are getting an opportunity to get their bylines published around this event and around the artists. More pretty pictures, because we love pretty pictures. And then Artinsure, and as we ran.
Oh, I think Sarah's frozen for a second there. Okay, are you back, Sarah? And you're on mute.
Where did you lose me? I'm sorry.
Just as you'd gone into the pretty pictures and you were going to talk about the competition.
So let me just share the last competition thing, because it's such a nice video he did. Let's see.
Beautiful, and an awesome reminder.
Yeah. So that is my spiel about OpenStudios.Joburg. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks very much, Sarah. And I know we had a few of our team that went through as well, and all the feedback that I got was incredible. You know, to be able to go to these places, to talk to the artists, see what they were thinking, because I think a lot of the times when you look at art, you don't necessarily get it until the artist has actually explained where they were coming from, what they were thinking, and then you look at it in a whole new way and go, oh, okay. And then it changes the perspective of the artwork dramatically. I don't know if you've had similar feedback.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's definitely that. And I think that kind of builds people's self-confidence, so that once they feel like they've got a handle on what's going on, their visual literacy gets better, they can start to pick up things themselves and say stuff with some level of confidence to their friends.
Definitely. And also, as you said, for you know, new buyers and emerging artists, it is starting sort of from the ground up. You know, you start to build your collection slowly. Do you have any advice that we can give? And I know it was something that we briefly touched on in terms of what kind of artwork, because I know with new artists, it's high risk, but it's potentially high reward, or as you say, risky, and the artist doesn't necessarily become the next big thing. So are there any pointers in what people should be looking for, you know, when they're purchasing works?
Look, I think you've got to decide what kind of collector you are. So that question about risk is important. If you're buying to later sell on, then you need to potentially do a bit of research about who the artist is. First and foremost, I'd say you need to love the work, regardless of what material it's made in. On average, a person will have an artwork in their collection for 20 years. So if you hate it, that's a crazy thing to do.
Not a good idea.
But I do think so. I mean, there are certain materials that you need to think about. There are questions of degradation. So, for example, we were talking about this the other day. Somebody buys an artwork, they frame it, and then they put it right in their beautiful entrance hall where the sun nails it every morning. Like, what will happen over time, regardless of whether it's a painting and an oil or an acrylic, like it doesn't matter, a fabric material, the color is going to fade unless you spend a lot of money on museum glass, which is somewhat more protective. It is going to fade. So, I mean, it is worthwhile once you purchase artwork to go to somebody who knows about proper framing. Make sure that when you're transporting it, that you've gone to somebody who knows what they're doing, because transport is actually the place that we typically see most artworks being damaged.
I can concur with that.
Yeah, the frames get smashed or the glass gets broken and damages the artwork. Obviously, if the artist is alive, it's ideal that the work gets repaired by the artist, but that's not always a possibility for all kinds of reasons. So yeah, I mean, I guess you want to find something you love and you want to know a bit about how to look after it. And if you don't know, or if you can't find the information, to go to somebody who you think does know. So whether that's the gallerist you're buying it from, the artist who may be able to help you. But degradation of materials is an issue. There are, for example, in all papers, there's acid, which is why a lot of really beautiful artists' papers are made with linen, because they have a reduced acid quantity. So if you're going to buy something on paper, you need to know about the quality of the paper. Cardboard seems to be the really popular thing at the moment. Cardboard does degrade. So yeah, there is a materiality factor. Some collectors, this does not bother. They love the fact that the artwork is changing over time. But from an insurance perspective, you need to be really clear that if that's going to happen, you know, obviously it's not going to be insured for that.
Correct, yes. So gradual deterioration would be excluded on most contents policies actually as well. So it is, the cover is for sudden and unforeseen events, you know, that happen at a specific time and place, as opposed to gradually over time being exposed to sunlight or moisture, for example.
Yeah.
So we're talking, so oils is probably going to last longer than watercolors.
Yeah. So oil, interestingly enough, takes forever to dry, months and months and months and months. So you could buy it and it could still be wet. So you need to be really careful framing it or moving it, applying any pressure, because often people don't frame oils behind glass. So you do need to be really careful about that. Oils do last, they are great, but they don't like heat. You know, it is oil, and if it is not set properly, you know, there can be some movement in the paint. So you need to be very careful about things like that. Paintings definitely in South Africa seem to be more popular. I think it's probably also the expense and the size of the thing versus something like a bronze sculpture, which is going to last forever, but the cost the cost is huge. Works on paper are supremely popular, especially in your lower buying markets. So these are all of your print editions. So for those people who don't know, this would be old kind of fashioned printing, where you quite literally have a plate and you run the paper, you ink up the plate and you put the paper on top of the plate and you run it under a pressed wheel, and the ink then gets put onto the paper. Those are editioned prints. A lot of people will tell you they're not originals, but they are originals. Typically, once somebody makes a plate, once they have run all of the editions, let's say they're 20 in a set, the plate gets destroyed so that no more prints can be made off of that and therefore devalue the item. Works on paper, in my view, should, unless you know really what you're doing, people should frame them, because they're very easy to damage. Water damage, moisture damage, animals love paper.
Yes.
So you want to like put it behind glass to keep it safe is the best possible kind of thing. But they are very popular. So as long as your framer knows what they're doing, as long as they're using archival acid-free tape to frame the thing, the work should survive long into
many years.
Yeah.
With any luck, yes, because that's the whole idea about appreciating assets, and they're not easily replaceable. Actually, they are irreplaceable. To make sure that we look after them properly. Are there any other questions that have come through?
Jared says, what about an open studios in Cape Town? Jared, I've been toying with the idea. It really depends how many gray hairs I want. But we have been toying with the idea of expanding it to other places. In theory, the concept isn't complicated, but obviously the setup in each location would be different, geographically speaking. Like the nice thing about the CBD is that it's very dinky. Our whole event takes place in a sort of 6 kilometer radius. So it's very small. So yeah, we are thinking about that.
And how do artists join Open Studios?
Okay, so that's a great question. So we work with the artists who are already based in these studios predominantly. So we start with those artists. Then we put out a call for applications, and any kind of empty spaces or things that we can do, curated group shows, fill up empty studios, we put out a call for applications for that. And that usually takes place in sort of mid-January, end of January. People can look at our social media stuff. So that's on Instagram, it's OpenStudios.Joburg, same for Facebook. So they can have a look at that.
Okay, and then what are the KYC ramifications for expensive commodities in this climate? Rapana, do you want to expand on that? What do you mean by the KYC ramifications? Okay, in the interim, I see that there is another question here. Can we touch on classic cars? So classic cars, very similar to artwork in that they are appreciating assets as well. This is not your vehicles that are, listed on the Mead and McGrath. So you've got your retail and your market values. They are insured also at agreed value because depending on the vehicle and the condition, that would impact the value as well as the rarity and demand. So classic cars fits in very well with the appreciating art industry. And we also insure them at agreed value. We recognize depreciation. It is a named driver basis and it is limited mileage, but you're welcome to get in touch with us and we're happy to give some more information on the classic car side. I think we'll probably do a specific iTOOsday on classic cars again in the near future.
I see Pano said, Kavandria said, KYC means know your client. So what are the know your client ramifications for expensive commodities in this climate?
I'm still not entirely sure what the intention or what the question is. Are we able to unmute Kapano, Caesar?
Oh, so Colleen says, so you know who you're dealing with in terms of money laundering, etc. Yeah, I will tell you this, money laundering using art is definitely a thing the world over. In fact, there have been 1 or 2 instances in this country where there have been concerns that some political parties have tried to use art in order to collect large donations from people without it being a direct large donation. So they've done an artwork auction, for example. The artwork has well outstripped the value of the artwork by millions. And then that fundraiser, the proceeds are going to the political party. So it definitely is done, definitely can be a problem.
No, it can be. And in terms of obviously the insurance, we need to know our clients from a financial point of view. So we do. Sorry, I'm just looking at the detail here. If somebody's buying a valuable painting, how do you make sure they aren't a money launderer or involved in a criminal activity? And I think that's quite a difficult one, actually, because they are purchasing the work, and particularly because you know that it's a legitimate artist. We've dealt with the artists, they've actually created it themselves. We know this is not a forgery because the artist is standing here next to their artwork, and that's one of the benefits of buying directly from the artist, is that it's not going to be, from another.
I would probably say, though, at least in terms of this event's context, it would be unlikely to happen because the values aren't high enough. I think if you were trying to do something to be able to launder something, you would probably look at works from old masters where you could pack millions into one piece as opposed to 80,000 Rand, because realistically 80,000 Rand in Europe or America or whatever doesn't translate to high enough values. But there is no FICA requirement, or there's no listing. I mean, in a lot of ways, like artwork is traded in very unknowable circumstances, if that makes sense. So
and there are
the
various
artist
ways to
or the
buy.
gallerist usually doesn't require an ID copy or a proof of address or any of those things. I will say though, in South Africa, that typically the art market is very, very, very small. So whilst we have had some instances of people trying to do bad deals or steal artwork, we've had that. The message does get passed around the community pretty quickly. We had a group of people who were going into galleries about a year ago, wanting to buy artwork, needing to take it immediately, proofs of payments not being accurately reflected. Thankfully, it was picked up pretty quickly, and the gallerist had their names and email addresses, and that information was shared amongst as many people as we could get it out to from a protection point of view. No, we are not, except potentially for the auction, the secondary sales market. There is no governmental regulation or control around the purchase or sales of artwork.
Yes, as you did mention, yeah, not an accountable institution, but it is worrying in the industry. And I know this is a global, global issue that we've got, but artists still need to sell their work. So if we are buying from, directly from the artist, and the person is purchasing it with their legitimate funds, as long as they're not going to be, reversing the payment and sort of defrauding the artist in that way, that is really the most that can be done in that arena.
Yeah, see, Megan makes a good point that yes, scanning the clients is a good point of view, a good thing to do, sorry. I can tell you that the artists are not going to do that. You may find that some of the bigger galleries do that, but the artists definitely won't. So I guess, unfortunately, that would fall to you guys as brokers for when you're requested to insure this work.
So yes, that's also why we need the valuations and the purchase invoices. It's not only to prove the value, but also to prove ownership of the works. And it's very helpful for provenance. So provenance plays an important role in art value, who has owned it previously, that you can track it back to make sure that it is legitimate, particularly for those artists that are long dead. I don't think we had basically we didn't have the technology that we've got today in order to record, and document the works that the artist has created. I think NFT smart contracts are going to be helpful in that regard, because if you've got the sale agreement on an NFT, then you would be able to trace who was the previous owner. And additional benefit for that is that often with the smart contract, additional funds go back to the original artist. Because I think that's also quite a sad part, and maybe something you can comment on, Sarah, is that the living artists don't make as much money as the galleries. They'll sell it for their price, and then all the markups that get added on don't necessarily go back to the artist.
So the problem, the biggest place that the problem occurs is when the artist is unknown and maybe sells a work for like 5,000 Rand. No one knows them, they're young, whatever. 20 years later, that same artwork gets sold on auction at Strass & Co. or Aspire or whatever. And it was 5,000. Remember that the artist made off the piece, and now it's selling for 100,000. Their career has appreciated in value, therefore their artwork has appreciated in value, but the artist will never, in this country at least, get a portion of those resale rights on the secondary market. There are places in the world that they do this, and I believe that Aspire is trying to do this, although it's not government mandated, and that is to give something back to the artist, because they never made anything really off of it to begin with. But it doesn't happen if I, for example, sell my work to you, Gail. There's no tracking of dealership sales like that, where it's just between two parties.
Where I think if when those smart contracts do come into play, then that would be an additional benefit, because I know the idea for the smart contract is that a percentage, once it gets sold from person to person, a percentage of that sale goes back to the original artist in perpetuity. Yeah. So that would obviously be ideal case scenario, so that the artist is actually reaping the benefits of the appreciation of their works.
Yeah. Yeah.
Great. Any other questions? I don't see any others.
There's a question here from Karen that says, how are the classic old-timer vehicles insured and who does the valuations?
We have a panel of independent valuers that we can share that would be able to assist with the valuations. And they are experts in the industry. So please let us know. I'm happy to send that through. Right.
I do think one thing that, sorry, Gail, that we haven't kind of mentioned, and it definitely seems to exist more in the secondary market, is the question of forgeries.
Oh, yes, of course.
There are a number of I mean, Cecil Scottness's daughter recently put out an article about how there were some forged works that were sitting on auction at Christie's. And even though she had informed Christie's, they had decided to go ahead with the sale. So I do think that from an insurance point of view can be problematic. And like you said, tracking down provenance invoices, if the artist is alive, or in Cecil Scottness's case, his daughter is definitely the one with the most information about his work and cataloging and all that jazz. There may need to be some due diligence, especially for the higher value pieces, that they aren't a forgery, that then get damaged in a flood. Pay me out for it, many millions. Yeah, that is definitely a problem in the visual arts, and especially in South Africa, or at least across the continent, because our work is less documented typically than in places like America or Europe or the UK. And especially from that period, from the 50s sort of onwards, prior to the internet, it can be quite hard to track that down.
And on that note, we do actually have extensions on the policy that can be purchased for fakes and forgeries, as well as for defective title. So fakes and forgeries being, if it's inadvertently bought from a legitimate dealer, as opposed from a guy on the side of the road, then there is cover available and an additional premium for that. And then defective title, that would be if your title to the work is defective because it's actually a stolen artwork. So you've inadvertently bought this artwork from a reputable dealer, and it turns out that it was previously owned by somebody else. It's going to be confiscated and given back to the original owner, leaving the client out of pocket, unless they have taken out defective title cover, which would compensate for that situation. And also, I would encourage everyone to check on our website, www.artinsure.co.za. We host our art theft register. So that's open to all and no charge for people adding their works. They don't have to be clients of ours. The reason that we host this is so that we can document stolen works and make sure that in the secondary industry, there is a place that they can check to make sure that they're not inadvertently selling something that has actually been stolen before. So quite interesting to have a look. You'll see quite a variety of different kinds of arts that have been stolen, from bronzes to coins to you name it. I know initially when this product was launched in 2007, people said, artwork isn't stolen. Everyone's only interested in the fast moving consumer goods. But as you've seen in your area, as I've certainly seen in mine, artwork is definitely a target, and not always intentionally, but sometimes they do steal the artwork during a robbery, and they don't necessarily know who they're going to sell it to or what their end game is, and that's often where we'll pick them up.
We had an exhibition in Cape Town 2 years ago, and the artist is Vivian Kohler, so he's a reasonably well-known artist represented by Gallery Momo, but not on the top of his game. And there was a tiny little artwork, just sort of slightly bigger than A4. And the exhibition was at the Alliance Francaise in the CBD. And Cape Town has a lot of cameras in the CBD, but somebody came in, drank wine, looked around, chatted, looked at the artwork, went back to the bar, went back to the artwork. And then very quietly, when no one was looking, he took the artwork off the wall, put it in his backpack, and he left. And thankfully, the gallery noticed pretty quickly. The police managed to track him on the cameras. They found him trying to get onto a train. He told them it was his artwork, that he owned it. So I don't think he had any intention in selling it. I think he just really liked the piece, which is a great compliment for the artist. But it was recovered and thankfully undamaged.
It is a lot better when that happens. Yes, that's the sad thing, is what often happens is if they don't have an end game and they don't have anybody to sell it with, then there can be panic and then the artwork can just be destroyed, which is very tragic because it can't be replaced, as we know, for all of these assets. Great. I think we've come to the end. Are there any other last minute questions? No, I don't see anything. Thank you so much, Sarah. Thank you for joining us. It's been really, really good having you on.